Hey guys, I'm Young, a full-time dad and a full-time professional with the goal to become the best parent possible. The Girl Dad Show is my journey interviewing fellow working parents aspiring to be both good at work and parenting. I'm going to do this by gathering and sharing unfiltered perspectives from my guests, so join me as I research parenthood one interview at a time. Zucchinis? Give me the paper. Nice.
I love you, Texas.
Anthony, thank you so much for joining me on my show today. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule.
Totally. Very excited to be here today.
Awesome. Well, let's get right into it. I would love for you to share with the listeners what you do for a living.
I'm one of the co-founders and co-CEOs at Revivin. And at Revivin, our mission is make hardware lifecycle management easier for enterprises.
It's awesome. And what are some of the big projects that you're working on right now?
Right now, some of the big things that I have, at least underneath my responsibilities, is our new SaaS platform, which is in its nascent phase, which is being launched right now, which is pretty exciting. I head up all of our re-commerce and repurposing at Revivin. And also, as always, recruiting and looking for great new talent to help us achieve our goals.
You guys are growing really fast. I feel like every time I look at LinkedIn, you guys have a new hire that you're welcoming to the team. It's a very, very exciting time for you, right?
You know, it's interesting because when you look at a lot of companies in terms of how COVID-19, affected them. When you look at Revivin, we were adversely affected by it in the beginning. It was a difficult time at Revivin. However, a year from that period, it has been our fastest growing time period in the company history. So I know you saw a lot of tech companies that had this like exponential growth during COVID for a bunch of different reasons. We're experiencing that right now, a year afterwards.
Oh, that is really interesting. I'm sure there's a lot of different reasons and theses you have for that as well.
One of the biggest things for us is when offices shut down, there was no more supply of hardware, right? So as in terms of managing hardware lifecycle management, our bread and butter is end of life. And so, all products that companies were no longer using, if it was broken, if it got refreshed, was being sent back to their offices, but no one was actually in the offices. And so after really, the summer of last year, you started to see some things show a little bit more life and it just gradually picked up again. And now what we're seeing now across the industry is all companies are now rebuilding their offices for hybrid environments. And then they're also closing down their secondary and tertiary offices. And so it kind of all happened at once. It was like as quickly as the offices closed down, it seems to be as quickly as, they're reopening in limited capacity, I would say. And all the stuff over the past year has just been being sent to the offices, but no one was opening up those boxes. So it was just like tons of stuff all over the place. And we're just really busy right now.
That's awesome. Well, I'm glad to hear that things are coming around at the latter part of it. And that's really exciting to hear about that. I also know that you have some exciting things that have also happened in addition to your business during COVID.
Sure.
Right? You also had, I'd love to talk to you about like your kids because that's right. So do you mind telling us about your kids? Like what kind of, how many do you have? How old are they? What are their names?
Totally. I am a girl dad all the way through. So I have my oldest daughter, Penny. She's a little over 2. She's going to be, almost 2.5. And then I have twin girls that were born in December. So they're, roughly, 6 months or so. So 3 girls, 21 months apart. And they're doing good. Twins are finally like sleeping through the night, which has been amazing. So that's been going on for the past several weeks. But it's been a wild ride, as I'm sure we all, as with you too, right? During COVID and kids, and whether you have schools or childcare, everything's been flipped upside down.
It really has been, and I know we talked briefly about it here and there, but I'd love to unpack that a little more with you today because I don't feel like we ever spend enough time talking about the kids and the similarities we have because we're both girl dads, like you mentioned, and we both have kids that are in their early single digit age, and so there's a lot of commonality that I don't think we ever really share about. So it'd be really great to know.
I agree.
Yeah. Do twins run in the family?
On my wife's side, they do. And, it's really interesting because, we actually, so this is funny. So when we were going through all the initial like doctor visits and everything like that, they usually catch twins relatively early on in the process. When they do the first, I don't even know what it's called. It's embarrassing. When they, when you see sonograms that they,
Yeah. I know what you mean. Yeah, I don't know what it's called.
Yeah.
Either,
So
it's cool.
we actually found out about the twins much later on, after actually the first trimester. So we were caught really off guard that we were having twins, because we also got told later on in the pregnancy. So it was a pretty wild thing. But yeah, they came out, they're identical. They look identical. It's not easy to tell them apart. I mean, we can tell now, depending on how they're sitting and their positioning and things like that. But the easiest way to tell them apart is actually, their ears are pierced. They just have two different types of earrings in.
Oh, are you serious? You pierced their ears?
Yeah, all the girls have their ears pierced.
Wait, was that? Oh, all of them. I was going to say, did you do that for the twins to be able to tell them apart?
It does help.
That'd be amazing. Like,
it does help.
I bet. Yeah, if I had twins, I would be like, oh, how do I tell these kids apart?
Yeah, totally.
What's it like having twins? Because I've always wanted twins. I always told my wife, I'm like, gosh, I wish I could get a 2-for-1 deal on these kids, so we can just bang them out so much faster, right?
So twins was like a lot in the beginning, but like everything as a parent, you really get used to it. And I think one of the biggest challenges that we had was just simply, you don't want to wake up a crying baby. Well, when there's two of them, if one of them cries, they usually wake up the other one. And so that plus just like settling them. So it took a lot of patience, but also just took a lot of time to recognize that you kind of have to make a lot of decisions, which is around, sometimes you have to like if they're both crying and you want to settle one, it's really, really hard as a parent to do this, especially with 3 kids. And, it's my wife and I, so there's like 2 people. But yeah, if you want to settle both of them and they're both crying, sometimes you just have to like leave the room that they're both in, pick up one, settle one, put them in a room, and then go back, settle the other one. And so you have to sometimes leave a baby crying in the beginning. And that was really, really tough for us. Also, the twins were preemies. So we didn't, this is crazy. So this is like, again, COVID wave 2 again in New York City. I live in Brooklyn. And when the twins came home, they were preemies. They were born at 33 and a half weeks, but they were fine. They were over 4 pounds. It wasn't that scary. They were in the NICU for about a week. They didn't need any assistance or anything like that. So when we brought them home, they just cried a lot. And we're like, has it just been a while? You know what I mean? Since, our oldest daughter's been a baby. And we didn't really think much of it. But then after like a couple of weeks, we're like, this is like abnormal. Kind of long story short, what ended up happening is, because they were premature, their stomachs weren't fully developed. And their stomachs were still developing after they were born. And as a result of that, they couldn't, easily go to the bathroom, and they got diagnosed as colicked. So we had 2, colicky babies for 90. It was a 90-day period basically from after they were born. Yeah, it was like pretty wild, but it was like, we're like, oh, I think everything's fine. We're like, this isn't how it was with Penny. And we were right, but they're fine. They're healthy. We're really lucky. I mean, it was never a scare. It was just more from like a parenting perspective of just having the twins, constantly be crying basically and being on kind of like lockdown,
Yeah, and it's also double the trouble, like you said, right? So it's not like it's just one kid crying. It's like 2 kids always crying together.
Yeah.
And then if they're both having the same issues, it's like everything's double. But I'm also hoping that the joy is also double too.
Oh,
right?
totally. And 100%. It's like amazing. And there's like so many cool things that they do. So like when you put them on the mat, they always lock arms. So I like, yeah. So like when they're playing, when they're on their backs, playing with playing with toys or whatever, they like lock arms. It's like a small thing, but it's really, really cool. So they'll have their arms locked.
That's wild.
Yeah, it's really cool. And then also they're like beacons to each other. So like they can make each other laugh and stuff. So if one's laughing, the way they're positioned, they can make the other, Gemma and Rosie. I don't actually think, do we say their names? The twins? They always get called the twins. It's so funny,
Yeah.
But it's Gemma and Rosie. Gemma's the middle child. Rosie's the youngest. And yeah, they're like, obviously they're like best of friends, but like that's just starting to happen right now. So it's been pretty cool, especially the past month or 2 months has been really cool because they're starting to sleep a lot more. They're like hanging out, you know what I mean? And yeah,
A little more aware.
a little bit more aware. And also
Yeah.
my oldest daughter now goes like on the ride board on the stroller. So I could like take one stroller and take 3 kids out. So that's like that's been pretty cool too.
That's awesome. So you do that even in New York, huh? You still just venture out into the streets and take them out.
We're pretty much always in Prospect Park. Brooklyn Botanical Gardens is right by us. So yeah, we're always in all those places.
Yeah, it's like always like that's another thing that I've always been curious about. Like, people that want to raise their kids in a city environment, right? Like I just never like fathomed it, because I feel like there's so much happening. But there are so many parents in these cities like raising their kids, and it kind of goes to my next question is like, did you grow up in a city? Like, what was your childhood like? How did you grow up?
I was actually born in Manhattan, but I identify as growing up in the suburbs. So I grew up in Lower Westchester County, in between Yonkers and New Rochelle, in a small town called Eastchester. So it's right outside, right north of the Bronx, right outside of the city. And we ended up there because my mom is originally from the Bronx, and my father was from Manhattan, and my grandparents had purchased a house in the same town that I ended up growing up in, Eastchester. So it's kind of like the whole family kind of getting out of the city. And kind of like, so I grew up there. It was awesome. It was great. One of the things that like we love about Brooklyn is my wife and I lived in Manhattan for 10 years. And really Brooklyn's in between kind of where I grew up and Manhattan. So where I grew up is like very condensed suburbs, still apartment buildings and stuff like that. But it's the suburbs for sure.
What was your childhood like? So did you have a tight knit family? And like, it sounds like you had a lot of extended family that was near you guys, all in Eastchester.
I believe I have over 75 blood relatives in the New York City area.
I'm from a big family too, so I totally get it. I have a pretty massive.
Are they all predominantly in the Bay Area?
Yeah, so my mom's side is predominantly in the Bay Area. Actually, the whole of my mom's side is all in the Bay Area, and my dad's side mostly in Korea. But yeah, both sides were pretty big. And so like I always kind of grew up in a big family, and I've always envisioned and imagined having a big family myself because that's just how I was brought up.
Sure.
I just wanted like an assembly line to get food and like, just like have a full, farm table where everyone has to like crowd in to eat, or you have to eat in shifts, like, I don't know if do you have any of those memories?
There'd be like the fold out tables, like attached to the dining room table that would like make a tea.
That's right.
And then some people would be like eating in the kitchen. If we, it was hysterical. Yeah, it was always like that.
Yeah. Yeah. There'd be like Christmases where we'd invite the whole extended family, and you wouldn't even know like 10 of the people there. You're like, how are you? Yeah. You're like, you're the cousin of someone. You're like, oh, this is awesome. Yeah. Yeah, I totally grew up like that as well too, and it was really fun. And I've always just envisioned having a big family myself, which is why I always wanted 4 kids and why I wanted twins so bad. So I was like so jealous when I heard you're having twins, because I'm like, dang it, that could like really like get the bang for the buck, right? Short amount of time, get double the output. But I think we're gonna stick with our 2, and unfortunately, we're gonna have to shelve the 4 kid plan. Yeah, because that's not going to happen.
Yeah, it's interesting. People. One person gave me some advice, which I thought was interesting, and it basically was like, it's going to be really hard or physically tiring in the beginning for you, but as your kids, leave the toddler age, it was going to be pretty magical because the twins are actually only 1 grade apart in school from Penny, so basically they're only going to be 1 grade apart. And
that's right.
The guy was telling me, he was giving me advice. He's like, they're always going to want to do the same things because they're going to be maturing at roughly the same space. So he's like, It's going to be really cool watching him grow up. Because my buddy was like, I have an 8-year-old and a 3-year-old. And he's like, the 3-year-old and the 8-year-old don't really have too much going on. And he's like, your children are going to be coming of age all around the same time. And I thought that was interesting because I never really thought about that.
Well, I think in a big family, like you can always latch onto a cousin or a
Right.
sibling that was your age. It was very easy to find someone that was at your interest or developmental cycle.
Totally.
And you just like locked into that family member because there's like there's always someone to choose from. But my wife came from a small family as well too. And I mean, I think she might think it's big until she met my family. And then she's like, oh, this is a really big family. But so it's kind of an interesting parallel there. Does that impact how you want to have a family, or are you going to stop at 3, or what are your plans?
I don't know. I mean, we always wanted to have like a baby, you know, and we always were going to have 3 kids, but our goal was to have like 2 kids as quickly as we could, you know, in terms of being separated from how far apart they were. And we did that, you know, because, you know, they're only 21 months apart. And then our goal was always to like, when we're a little bit further on in our careers, you know, when both kids were, you know, out of diapers and kind of in school in some way, then have a 3rd kid, right? And that was always the plan. So the plan was always to have 3, and then we got the twins, and so which is awesome. But I don't know if in a year or 2 from now, or probably realistically in like 2 or 3 years from now, if we're going to still have that feeling about wanting to have like a baby around. And so the 4th to us is it's like an unknown. But I will tell you, you know, right now it's kind of even hard to think about that.
So when it's so physically demanding, it's so hard to think about. Yeah, I remember that stage. Yeah, it's the worst. Yeah, you're just so exhausted and hungry and just like tired and stressed out. Yeah.
We just started to get a babysitter again, you know, with the COVID and everything, because now everyone's like vaccinated. Not everyone, but there's a lot of people that are vaccinated and so forth. So last Friday was our first night since the twins were born that we had a babysitter come, and Angela and I went out to dinner. And it was like really, really nice, you know, and we're doing it again this Friday. Yeah. And so that's what I'm saying. It's like, I don't like to think right now about number 4, if we're going to do it or if we're not. But as you know, like as the kids get older and you get a little bit more time back, then I'll probably have that headspace and we can think a little bit more about it.
So you said something very interesting, which kind of goes into like the stuff that I'm trying to wrestle with and figure out during this podcast is how other people are balancing work with parenting.
Dude,
you know, and like, what does that look like?
Right? You tell me.
You're running a fast growing.
You tell me. Angela and I go through so many changes to our schedule. We're trying to find our rhythm. We've had some success. We've had other, like, you know, other challenges, and we're still reshaping it, and we're still trying to figure it out. And we started this new routine, which has been really, really awesome lately. And it's that earlier in the afternoon. And then on Sundays, pairing that with where we actually have a babysitter come just for a couple of hours on Sunday. And I work during that time period, and it's when Penny's napping. And so babysitter grabs the twins, and then Angela has free time to herself as well. When I say free time, you know the deal. Yeah. It's like planning,
laundry, like, dishes.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, free time.
Maybe a workout. Yeah, exactly.
Free time. So that's been a wrinkle that we've thrown in there that's been really nice. And, you know, look, I mean, our attitude about everything is it's been a really wild, like, you know, year plus now. But, you know, we're really fortunate. We have like the ability to kind of situate ourselves and figure out what care is kind of best for us and go from there.
Yeah, it's a hot topic in my household too. I mean, it's the same reason why I even like started this podcast. The whole point of the podcast is to be like, I can't be the only one trying to figure this out. There's got to be other people struggling with this, right? Like, how do I be successful at work while I'm still being a successful parent? I don't want to sacrifice either, you know? And that's like, it's like a conundrum. And like my first instinct was to like interview people. I was like, I'm going to go ask other people. And then I'm like, I should record these because these could be really interesting. And there you go. That's why the whole podcast started.
How do you do, like, pretty much, I think the big thing, right, is the morning routine and the night routine, right? And I think those are the really hard parts because I'm a really early riser and I have no problem at all waking up at 5 o'clock, working out and going straight to work and coming home at 5. I can do that. But my wife, understandably so, with the 3 kids, can't handle, or I shouldn't say can't handle. She can handle it because she's the best. But that wouldn't be fair for her to have to handle the morning routine every day without me, you know? So I don't know, how do you all deal with it?
It's been like a really interesting process for us. Obviously, we're still figuring it out as well. And my wife are very different. And I know we haven't talked a lot about our significant others, but Amy and I are like polar opposites.
Oh, okay.
And it's like the classic example of like, you know, opposites attract. I think she's like, you know, she's beautiful and I'm ugly and, you know, she's smart and I'm dumb. I'm making jokes there. She really is pretty, but I'm more just saying like, we just have different perspectives on life, right? And so I feel like, I would much rather try to outsource some more of the stuff that we need to do, like get a babysitter, like you talked about. And so we're starting to get to that point where, she's like open to trying those things. And so we have a lot of these teenage kids here that want to babysit in our neighborhood. And I'm like, let's just hire them. They want to work, and they great with our kids, and we could use the time, And so even if it's just to do laundry, like, we could use the time, right?
Especially when you're home.
That's right.
When you're home, you have a lot of flexibility with care. I at least I feel that way, and so does Angela, because you're there. If God forbid something happens, you could like jump in and stuff like that. So I always look at it as like two types of care. There's like care when we're like physically present, and then there's care when we're like gone. Like during the workday and stuff like that.
Yeah. No, exactly. That's a good point. But I'm a little bit different because Amy doesn't work.
Right.
So
Angela doesn't work either.
She doesn't. Okay, got it.
I don't know if I told you. She stopped working when the twins came.
Oh, awesome. Is that like a joint decision, or is that something that's going to be permanent or semi-permanent, or?
As long as we can make it happen, we're going to try and, see how it works out. But that's also like another up in the air thing. So she's been doing some consulting stuff on the side for a couple hours a week, and she's enjoying that. And we're just figuring it out. But really, when the twins came, we knew that I have 3 kids under 2 years. Her job was extraordinarily demanding and required a lot of hours. And, it was a mathematical.
So does yours.
Totally. Right. So it was like 2 of those together would just be really difficult. And also stuff that we've talked about, like, where are we going to live? Right. We've been renting for a really long time. What are we going to do about the school situation? Where are they going to go to school? What classes? And, we hadn't done any of that stuff. And so we just had a lot of personal things that we wanted to accomplish together. And it would be difficult for us both to do that while working, our schedules. So I think we're going to play it by ear. I think the goal is for at least this year, for her not to work full time. But, it's the same thing. She's, it's the first time for her that she is, full-time mom, which I feel like which is harder than
way harder.
It's way harder. So, we're figuring it out. It's really an up in the air thing. And we just said, hey, let's give it a shot this full year and see how, and let's just kind of like check in and see where we are towards the end of the year.
It's really interesting because so many parents go different ways, right? And I think a lot of the people that I talk to like struggle with this aspect of needing 2 incomes to survive,
right?
Or to like thrive, I should say. And then, for you to have the ability to like be able to make it work with one is a big deal,
right?
Especially within our age group. A lot of our peers can't do that right now. And so a lot of parents are like struggling with this idea of doing it, nor do they want to do it. I've actually met quite a few people that don't want to quit their jobs and they want to continue to work, and then they just outsource the nanny care while they work, and then they take over at night, right? So no judgment either ways, but like it's just really interesting that you chose to go down that road, which is becoming less and less common.
It is. And it's also one of those things too where it's really difficult to go from 2 incomes to 1. And I think everyone just goes about it differently. I mean, my wife and I prepared for a really long time. And so when we, financially, we were ready to have children, and I think, the way we think about it is a lot of the, milestones that you want to set, you know what I mean? Financially, whether it's for a down payment on a house or things like this, we were really fortunate in that regard to make a lot of those things happen. Obviously not all the things that you want. And so, just kind of living off of one salary for the next year or two isn't as scary, basically. But I mean, long term, it would probably be quite difficult, so we just have, but as you know, with work, it's like, I don't know what's going to happen in 2 years from now with our company, where we're going to be. And, that's the thing that you founded a company before, is dealing with the ambiguity. Right. And so that's one of the things I think from our jobs, you get very comfortable dealing with ambiguity, and I don't lose much sleep over that.
Yeah, there's not a problem that you guys haven't been able to overcome over the last 5 or 6 years, maybe even longer that you've been in business. And I can't imagine you not being able to overcome the next set of challenges. And the next set of challenges you guys are facing are actually good challenges. They're like growth challenges. So if anything, you're going to end up being, probably on the net positive side of that equation. But it is interesting that you planned out your kids based on like some certain financial milestones. You like basically were very strategic about having kids.
Oh, dude, totally. I mean, yeah,
It sounds a lot like how you work.
Yeah.
You work like that too. You're very calculated in how you roll different initiatives out, when you want to spend money on what, when the timing needs to be. Like, you're also very calculated at work. So it's kind of interesting to hear how that parallels over.
I think also like my wife and I waited as long as possible to like have children, being that we got married when we were younger. Well, at least for New York standards, you know.
What is that in New York standards? I'm from California, now in Texas. I don't know what New York standards are.
I got engaged when I was 27, married maybe when I was 28, I want to say. Angela's a year older than me.
Yeah.
But yeah, I feel like most people in New York get married in their 30s and everything like that.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, because I feel like there's a lot of parallels with how you operate, right? Like you work the business. Like you definitely don't like to make irrational decisions, and you definitely like marinate on things and make sure you enjoy the moment. You enjoy it for whatever it is.
Totally. Like a bootstrapped high growth mentality, right?
Yeah, even if it's like it's an uncomfortable situation. Like, I mean, even just like, for example, if you don't mind me putting some of the information on blast a little bit, like you're talking about like, hey, the biggest conundrum right now is recruiting. And, you know, like if you can get through these next 2 months, we'll be in a much better position at the other side of the bridge and da-da-da. But like, there's not a part of you that's stressing out about it. You're like enjoying the problem that you have to solve for 2 months. You're like, yeah, I'm going to marinate the fact that this is a problem. And it's not like you're not solving for it, but you're not like freaking out about it. You're like literally enjoying the journey as you go. It's kind of this almost like Zen perspective on.
It's interesting, Young. I don't know what you've seen working with other companies, but you know, we've been doing this for 8.5 years. And I feel like when you run a company, when you start a startup and you're growing, you have a lot of like near death experiences, right? Or you have some really, really, really difficult challenges that you feel you can't overcome. But that never really ends. However, when those tough situations arise, or when it becomes really challenging, I do believe over time you just become more confident and being a bit more zen about it. It's like, okay, we're going through this period. Here's what we need to do. Let's just kind of get through it. And you know, there's not much really to talk about other than just like executing and getting it done, right? And so some stuff that we talked about, we're like half the way there, and we just got to keep grinding it out for the next 60 days. And it's like it's like the S curve. I don't know if you've ever seen that. It's like, you know, then you get all the people, hopefully make the right decisions from a strategy perspective, personnel decision. From that, you go through, hyper growth phase, or you grow even quicker than we're growing right now. Then everything breaks again, and then you just kind of go through the same circuit over and over and over again, right?
You're looking at the macro. You just want to like make sure you're getting to the desired, whether you go this way or that way. As long as you're heading in that direction, you're happy.
You just got to like find a way to grind through the more challenging times, and when things are going good, you know, do as best you can to enjoy them.
Here's $1 million question. Do you raise your kid like that?
There is something that I believe, along with my wife, which is, definitely probably a little bit more on the stronger sense of things, but we do want our children to feel a sense of scarcity and urgency, along with, all obviously the most important things, right? You know, the love, the care, the education, the family, the hard work. But I mean, like, we're putting all, 3 girls in one bedroom, and, if one of them's like crying and bothering the other one, we want them to feel that a little bit. And so we don't have to do that. We can take the third bedroom and turn it into, a third bedroom for them. But there's a lot of that we want to, instill upon our children, because there's a whole like a little bit larger philosophy that I think about, like happiness, basically, right? And so the way I think about it is the difference between poverty and prosperity is gratitude. And gratitude is the difference between life expectations and reality. And so really putting our children in a position where, they have the ability to proceed and progress, right? And feeling that certain sense of constraint in their childhood, right? And a little bit of an urgency about having to get things done. really, in our opinion, gives them the ability to then kind of go out there and flourish by giving them a certain baseline, if you will.
That was beautiful. That was amazing.
Yeah.
I love that. I freaking love that so much. That is incredible. You should write a blog about that so I can read it. Yeah, like actually flush out that thought, because that's actually really incredible, man. That's really beautiful. And it kind of goes into like this whole concept of like you wanting to imprint like the direction, not necessarily like trying to control the micro.
Right.
You're like, hey, I just want them to head in this general direction. And I'm going to do that by instilling these behaviors and these kind of concepts and values, right? Of like gratitude, of grit, you know, or like having these like sense of urgency. Like it's really, really interesting because, you know, a lot of parents are, you know, very big on nature nurture and like embodying the example that they want to instill versus like teaching them. Like there's just a lot of variables.
And there's no right answer.
Like so many.
And there's
variables.
no right answer.
There's no right answer.
And all the kids are different.
And every kid's
all the
different.
kids are different too.
That's right. No.
So you have this like philosophy, and then it might like completely backfire with one kid, and then you're really, you know, cornered up against the wall. You're like, okay,
Totally.
we'll change it with one kid, but what am I going to do with the other ones? What about you, Young? How do you think about it?
I'm the worst parent in the world, so you shouldn't ask me. Yeah, no. I love my kids, and I'm like the biggest pushover, man. They ask me like 3 or 4 times, and I just give in. Like my wife constantly tells me, she's like, I have like 4 kids, because my dog is a kid too. She's like, I have 4 kids. Like I need another parent sometimes because you're literally like, why would that be a good idea? And I'm like, I feel like it's a good idea. And, you know, I love donuts for breakfast. That sounds amazing. Let's do that.
Oh.
And so I'm a big pushover, man. I try to be a parent. I try to be a good disciplinarian. But, dude, I just like, they start crying or like they ask me a couple more times. Like, you know, they're like the best salespeople ever. You know, they just consistently ask, like, can I have a cookie? Can I have a cookie? And I'm like, why can't I have a cookie? What's wrong? I can see the cookie right there. Like, you have a cookie. Can I have a cookie?
Hard.
We can both have cookies.
It requires so much mental fortitude.
Oh, yeah. It's so hard. And like, it's also like, you know, am I doing it wrong? Am I doing it right? I'm not entirely sure, you know? And like, I think Lily is much more aware of like, you know, common sense and courteousness and all those things. Because, you know, like me and Amy like equally spend a lot of time on our first one, but our second one, I'm like a complete pushover, and so she's gonna be a world-class B. I preemptively apologize to the world because I'm spoiling that one rotten. Like I can't even control it. Like she's just has me wrapped around her finger, and I try so hard, and she knows it. She just knows that she can get away with anything with me. So it's really bad. So I wouldn't take my advice on that.
It's great though.
But I like your idea of like not worrying about the micro, because then it gives me hope that I could still be a good parent and focus on the macro. And I've been really thinking about like, you know, like teaching them like overarching things of like controlling your destiny, like, you know, getting what you want, being aggressive, being confident, and those kind of things. And then on the more micro things, I've just been like trying to like inject my personal ambitions towards them because I really want them to be musicians.
Really?
Are
you into music a lot?
I am. Yeah, I would have loved to have been a musician growing up. I just wasn't good enough to do that professionally. And my mom had to have the honest conversation.
Not gonna
You're not
happen.
that good, dude. Yeah, it's not going to happen. Someone has to tell you. And so she told me that. And so I went down business. But I just have like this desire to like play music with my girls. And it was like, that'd be like a dream of mine, right? I'd be so happy. And I'd be like in heaven if my girls like sang songs with me and stuff. And so that's kind of where I want to push them towards. But, you know, obviously you don't want to like, I've heard it both ways. And so I don't know what your take on this is, but I've heard people say, if you have like music in your life, and that's just the standard. So they'll grow up playing music because that's just what it is. That's how your family operates, right? Or you keep it open-ended and then you just encourage and nurture them exploring. And if they find music, then you nurture it, right? It's like there's like this whole polarity. I don't know if you've ever heard of this, but like you like by setting the example, incorporating it into the life, it becomes what you do. It's just standard versus like, you know, letting them explore it and figure it out for themselves. I don't know what your take on that is.
Like the certain values you want to have, like with your children, maybe to some degree. Or?
I think values, are inherently standard because you can't really control that, right? Because you're going to end up like disciplining and encouraging. I guess that's not true because certain kids will react to discipline and encouragement in the opposite way. That's right.
That's the reason why
there's no way.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no playbook for this shit. Yeah, there's no playbook for
No,
this.
there's not. I just am like really interested to see, because like our kids are still really young, as they start to really
Yeah.
become more independent. How do you deal with the different personalities? I think that's going to be an interesting thing. Like my wife and I talk about that. Like with 3 kids, one of them might be artistic. One of them might be like, really good with numbers. Another one might be more into athletics. And how do you like manage all those different types of things? And as a parent, getting excited about all those different things, right? Because you have to be like equally excited. Like I know things that excite me,
That's right.
So,
That's right.
like
totally
you're excited about the music stuff, right? So let's say one of your kids like is all in on music and picks up an instrument and is like fantastic at it and like wants all lessons and you're like loving it. And then like, one of your other kids is into athletics and maybe that's like not up your path or something like that. And so you're trying to figure out, you want to be just as excited about whichever kid, is doing athletics just as you would about, whoever's involved with the music.
Yeah, I know it's going to be hard because my wife's super into sports and I'm not, right? She wants them to be super athletic. So like she wants them to play sports and like be outdoors and like play with bugs and all sorts of things. And I'm like, no, play music, and I just want them to be in arts and like music. But yeah, I mean, I got to get excited about it. Right? I got to learn how to do that. I mean, because the alternate is that I just say, hey, you're your mom's kid, and then you'll be my kid.
Right. Like favorites.
Which is terrible.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, I know this has been a really great conversation. I could probably talk to you about this for hours, but I do want to be mindful of your time. And I know you're running a very successful company. And so I just want to make sure that we're wrapping up here with 4 questions that I like to ask every single guest. So let me go and fire those off for you so I can get you out of here. Okay?
Sure.
All right. So what advice do you have for other parents and soon to be parents?
I'm not a fan of giving advice because I feel like advice comes with so much personal baggage.
Yeah.
What I will say is what I've experienced, and if anyone's listening, what they can take from it, for themselves. And I think outside of obviously all the immense amount of joy and every that children bring, is I was really unprepared personally for the amount of logistics and planning that goes into having kids. And so I never really understood. I'm like, oh, your kid's napping, so I can do whatever I want. And I didn't realize, like, no, you have to clean bottles, you have to make lunch, you have to like all that type of stuff. So that's the one, that's a small thing, but just the amount of logistics and being able to handle that, I think it's like the third component that isn't spoken about enough, where you have your work, then obviously you have the relationships with your children when you're with them, and then you just have this like logistical planning component that I really didn't appreciate enough. And I'm fortunate enough to have a better wife than me that, really runs point on it. But, as we've had obviously 3 kids now, I'm involved in a ton of it as well. And so that was the one surprise to me. But I mean, it's the best, right? Having kids is the absolute best. That was my one surprise. So if it be things that I would have prepared for in advance, was really trying to think about, hey, how do I handle planning the best? What's the best way of going about it? And everything like that.
Awesome. You kind of answered a couple of the next questions, but I'm still going to ask it, and you can repeat it if you need be. So if you can go back and tell yourself one thing before having kids, what would it be?
I would tell myself to exercise even more than I was doing before, because it is really hard to get workouts in with the variability of all these schedules, as what I'd say, right? Like you can't control, if you want to wake up early in the morning to go work out, and then one of the kids just ended up waking up early, you're done. So you're done. I wish I would have even gotten in, more workouts and more routines to give me more of a baseline from where I'm at right now.
What's your all-time favorite business book?
I do find traditional business books, to be honest with you, quite boring. So
yeah,
I'm not really too big on. I like stories more than anything else.
Yeah, you're an artist. Maybe.
I don't know. Yeah,
I don't know. What is the most surprising thing that you learned about yourself after becoming a parent?
How much patience that I have. And probably the most difficult. Probably something I didn't realize. How much patience I'm a pretty antsy, high anxious, like high gunning type of personality. I like to
Yeah.
do work, grind.
I do.
And
Yeah. You're not patient at all.
I'm impatient, right?
Yeah,
And how much
that's
patience
right,
I've gained with having kids. Just it's
Wow.
really been forced out of me, and it's been a really, really healthy thing. And it's been really amazing because, like, you're holding two kids, or let's say you're watching three, and one of them's so happy, watching TV or playing with a toy. You're reading to one, another one starts crying, and it's just like you accept that it's not 100% in your control. And if you try and control everything, you're just going to set yourself up for failure. And I think it just requires a tremendous amount of patience. And it's been really, really, really cool in that regard, I think. And I think it's helped me a lot at work as well.
Yeah, that's great. I love that's carried over to work too. That's fantastic. Hey, Anthony, I just want to say thank you so much for spending time with me to talk to me about parenting and your kids and family. I had a ton of fun having you on the show, and I learned a ton and a lot of nuggets that I'm sure all the listeners were able to pull from as well, especially your thing about prosperity and gratitude. I think that was really, really interesting. And I can't wait to continue to encourage you to write a blog about it to further elaborate your concept, because I think there's a lot to be said about your navigation of parenting, and it's very, very special. So thank you again for taking the time, man.
My first podcast. I couldn't be happier. It's with you, Young. So it's been fun.
Oh,
it's been fun. So I'm interested to see how it all comes out. So it's great.
Very good. Thank you, brother.
All right.
I'll talk to you
Bye-bye.
soon. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of The Girl Dad Show. We really hope you enjoyed that interview. And as always, please take a moment to review, rate, and subscribe. We'll see you next time.